The Jewish girl had simply come home an hour early. She accidentally overheard her parents talking about the German labor camp. Her father had unexpectedly learned from a friend that the so-called labor camp was actually a death camp. It was a place the German forces had set up specifically to kill and eliminate Jewish people. Over the past few years, her father had saved some money through business, so funding an escape would not have been a problem. But at this moment, the German forces had already ordered the entire city of Amsterdam to be sealed off and strictly forbade any Jewish person from leaving. Although she overheard her parents' conversation and felt that nothing in her life had changed, except now, her clothes carried a bright yellow six-pointed star. Until this day, when Anne and several friends were playing at the beach, they had just gone into the water when a group of boys walked over. They looked at the six-pointed stars on the girls' clothes and immediately drove Anne and the others away from the beach, because according to the newest order from the German forces, Jewish people were forbidden from entering the beach. In the days that followed, the German forces issued various laws that restricted the freedom of Jewish people. But where there is a rule, there is a workaround. Since they could not go to public places, Anne's family invited friends to gather in their home. Since they could not go to the cinema, they set up a private screening room in their house. They thought they could live like this safely until the war ended. Yet what was destined to come could not be avoided. One day, Anne's mother suddenly came to her in a panic and told her to hurry home. Seeing her mother's frightened face, Anne knew something must have happened. But before she had time to ask what was going on, her mother ran anxiously toward the place where her father worked, and had no choice but to return home and wait quietly for her mother to come back. Soon the whole family gathered together and began a tense family meeting, since the German forces had already started arresting Jewish people in Amsterdam. Anne's sharp-minded father decided to protect the family by leading them into hiding first. But just as they were nervously packing their clothes and luggage, getting ready to leave the house, the doorbell suddenly rang. All four family members tensed up instantly, and stood frozen in place, staring vigilantly at the door. Her father signaled everyone to stay silent while he slowly moved toward the door. Fortunately, it was not the German forces coming to arrest them but rather her father's friend. It turned out that the couple had come on their own to offer help, and they were willing to provide shelter for Anne's family. And so, before the German forces began their full arrest operation, Anne's family had already found a hiding place. Before leaving, her father deliberately wrote a random address on a piece of paper, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it onto the floor to confuse the German forces who would soon arrive. On this misty and rainy morning, Anne carried her luggage and followed her father as they began an escape journey that would last for years. Soon they arrived at the grocery store run by her father's friend, and stood in the rain and looked up at the sky in silence. She knew this might be the last time she could freely stand on the street and feel the rain. She took in the final taste of freedom with all her heart, drew one last deep breath of fresh air, then turned and walked decisively into the store. Anne's family was taken to a hidden space behind a cabinet on the second floor of the grocery store. After entering the hidden space and climbing the stairs, they found an old three-room apartment. For a long time to come, the four of them would have to live in this dim, gray room. Although it had a kitchen and bathroom and looked like a complete home, they could not open the curtains or the windows in order to avoid exposure. The room was gloomy and dark, and they could not even turn on any lights. They had to speak softly and move carefully. They were not allowed to use the kitchen or bathroom during the day, because right beneath them was the grocery store. Several workers were in the store every day. To avoid attracting the workers' attention, Anne's family did not dare to move around while they worked, afraid that even the faintest sound might reveal their hiding place. To keep anyone from casually shifting the cabinet that covered the hidden space, her father's friend secured it tightly with wire, and also began writing a diary to record everything she saw and heard each day. She stood near the window and secretly observed the outside world through the tiny gap in the curtains with a pair of binoculars. She decorated the walls of the room in the way she liked. Only on weekends, when the workers downstairs had their days off, could they speak normally and walk around freely. After being repressed for days, and even danced joyfully with her sister, her father's friend would open the hidden space at the same time every Saturday to bring them supplies for the coming week. They thought the four of them could live quietly like this until the war ended, but their peaceful life suddenly changed with the arrival of several strangers. Perhaps her quiet complaints had reached the heavens, because that day her father's friend kindly took in another family of three. From then on, Anne's family had neighbors, and finally had a new friend. But Anne did not like this new friend, because the boy was quiet and did not enjoy talking to others. Most importantly, the boy brought a cat with him. The boy's cat reminded Anne of the cat she had left behind when they fled. The cat she had been forced to leave at home became Anne's greatest regret after coming here. Because of the cat, Anne always kept a certain distance from the boy. but her sister quickly became good friends with him, and from then on she became the bridge between Anne and the boy. Over time, Anne finally accepted the cat he brought, but no matter what, it could not ease the suffering caused by being unable to go outside, and often lay alone on the floor, imagining herself lying on a warm, comfortable beach. She imagined her friends laughing and playing beside her, the gentle sunlight shining on her, and the soft sea breeze brushing across her face. Time passed minute by minute through Anne's torment and daydreams. On her 134th day in hiding, her father's friend took in another Jewish refugee, a dentist, and the group of 7 in hiding officially became 8. To welcome the dentist, they even held a simple dinner that evening, and wrote a prose poem and recited it in front of everyone. From the dentist they learned that Amsterdam had already become a nightmare for Jewish people. The German forces were conducting sweeping arrests throughout the city. Large numbers of Jewish people had already been captured and sent to camps. Only a few were still trying desperately to hide and survive. Hearing the dentist's words, the smiles on everyone's faces instantly vanished. More than 4 months of hiding had kept them away from the chaos outside and had given them an illusion. They believed that as long as they remained cautious every day and lived carefully, they could keep surviving until the war ended. But the dentist's words pulled them harshly back to reality. The reality was that no matter how carefully they lived in the shadows, being discovered and arrested by the German forces could happen at any time, and was seriously peeling potatoes one slice at a time. But the dentist thought her method wasted too much. He reminded her to shave the skin as thinly as possible. He even demonstrated how to hold the knife and how to remove just a thin layer of skin, and watched his demonstration patiently, then immediately returned to peeling the potatoes in her own way. The frustrated dentist had no choice but to explain again that his method was the fastest and best. But the moment he lowered his head, and secretly shot him a look of annoyance. Anne's family and the other 4 Jewish strangers had been hiding in this apartment for over a year to escape the German forces. For more than a year, Anne had been squeezed into this tiny space, surviving in a narrow gap. The stifling days made the teenage and even more rebellious and even more unpredictable in her personality. She often hid alone in a corner and cried in secret. Sometimes she could not sleep for entire nights. She often sat in one place without moving, staring at the window covered by a curtain, and she often talked to herself in front of the mirror. She frequently spoke back to her parents in a strong tone, and sometimes she even intentionally did things they did not allow. She imagined the outside world countless times. She missed the feeling of walking barefoot on the grass. She missed the cool water of the mountain streams. She missed the warm days when sunlight and gentle breezes brushed across her face. But Anne could only feel these beautiful moments and the taste of freedom in her imagination. In reality, she lived carefully in the hot, dim space on the second floor with the others. Right beneath them was the grocery store. Workers were there every day, so they usually could not make any sound and even had to speak with caution. Otherwise, they might attract the attention of the workers downstairs and reveal their hiding place. But on this day, the always cautious and accidentally fell from the stairs, and the loud noise immediately caught the attention of a worker in the store. The man instantly turned off his machine, raised his head quietly, and listened carefully. Although Anne was in pain from the fall, she did not dare make a single sound. She lay helplessly on the floor without moving, terrified of creating even the slightest noise. The other Jewish people hiding with her also widened their eyes in fear and froze completely. In that moment it felt as if the entire world had gone silent. A silence so heavy it felt suffocating. To the worker, the second floor was supposed to be just a storage area, but he did not know that his boss was secretly hiding 8 Jewish refugees in a small room in that warehouse. Everyone hiding in that space instantly stopped all movement, their eyes full of panic as they silently prayed that their hiding place would not be discovered. Anne, still aching from her fall, did not dare make the faintest sound. She lay motionless on the floor, afraid even a whisper might expose them. Time passed. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and suddenly felt that each second was as long and unbearable as an entire day. Fortunately, the worker eventually assumed that a mouse had gotten into the warehouse, so he turned the machine back on and continued working. The people hiding in the small room escaped danger by sheer luck. But that night, a violent bombardment suddenly erupted outside. The Allied forces launched a large air raid on the German-controlled city. One explosion after another shook the areas near the space where Anne hid. Terrified by the intense blasts and the flashes of light, Anne panicked. To distract herself, she kept running up and down the stairs. When she finally ran out of strength, she collapsed helplessly into her sister's arms and cried. But her father was shocked and filled with joy, because he knew that the Allied air raid meant the counterattack against the German forces had begun. It also meant that their days of hiding and surviving in the shadows might soon come to an end. The bombing lasted a long time, but fortunately the space where they hid was not hit. After this air raid, Anne, who had been hiding here for more than a year, finally saw a glimmer of hope for freedom. The girl who had been depressed for so long slowly began to grow optimistic. A smile gradually returned to her face. She began studying hard, trying desperately to make up for all the time she had lost. She even quietly started a sweet romance with the boy who hid with them. She also began carefully organizing and revising the diary she had been writing all this time, planning to publish it when the war was over. Time moved forward slowly as Anne waited with all her hopes. 2 months later, they finally received the news that Italy had withdrawn from the Axis and surrendered to the Allied forces. Everyone was instantly overwhelmed with joy, and their voices unconsciously grew louder. Immersed in happiness, they even began to sing softly. But unfortunately, that day the worker downstairs left the store early. The moment the machine stopped, he once again noticed sounds from above. He clearly remembered that the second floor was only a storage area, but at that moment, in the hidden space upstairs, the 8 Jewish refugees secretly sheltered by the owner were quietly singing in excitement. They had just learned that Italy, Germany's ally, had surrendered. After more than a year trapped in the narrow space, these people suddenly saw the dawn of freedom. They could not help singing praises to express their endless joy, but they did not expect that the worker, who had suddenly finished early, heard faint noises from above after turning off the machine. He stretched out his neck and pressed his ear against the beam, listening carefully. Only then did the people upstairs, still lost in joy, realize that the machine downstairs had stopped. They immediately stopped singing and froze in place, even their breathing becoming cautious. Before the worker could listen more closely, silence fell over the second floor. He looked at his co-worker in confusion. Just as the two of them were puzzled, their boss, the one secretly protecting the refugees, appeared in time. The worker told him that he seemed to have heard something from upstairs. The boss quickly explained that it must have been mice. He said many things in the storage room had already been chewed by them, and he was planning to buy poison to deal with it. Hearing this, the worker stepped down the stairs, half believing and half doubting, and the 8 refugees hiding in the small room upstairs escaped danger once again by sheer luck. That night, the Jewish people, still immersed in the joy of Italy's surrender, suddenly heard noises from the grocery store downstairs. Anne's father immediately told everyone to stay silent, then quickly walked over and turned off the light, because every day after 6 in the evening, the store downstairs was closed and empty. The sudden noise instantly tightened everyone's nerves. Anne shut her eyes and hid in her mother's arms, yet she was still terrified. She believed the noise might be the German forces coming to arrest them. Her father quietly stepped out of the hidden room with 2 other men. They grabbed a few tools to use as weapons and slowly moved to the top of the stairs. After watching carefully for a long time, they found the first floor completely empty. They gathered their courage, went downstairs, and after checking, discovered a hole in the door. They wanted to find something to block the hole, but at that moment a couple happened to pass by. The couple were neighbors of the store owner, and they noticed the hole and kept shining their flashlight through it. With no time to hide, the 3 men could only stand perfectly still behind the door. Luckily, the neighbors eventually decided not to get involved and walked away. The 3 men quickly seized the moment and hurried back into the hidden room on the second floor, but they never imagined that the neighbors who had just left would report it to the police. Soon they heard voices from officers outside the store, and everyone's nerves reached a breaking point. The sudden arrival of the police scared Young, and so much that she buried her head deeply in her mother's arms. The constant knocking from downstairs filled the hidden room with fear and panic. Although the police eventually left after getting no response, the terrified refugees still huddled together, unable to sleep. They anxiously waited for daylight, because at 7 in the morning the store would open, and if the police returned, the owner who had been sheltering them would find a way to cover for them. Time passed slowly, and they finally heard the store open for business. Once again, the group of Jewish refugees escaped danger. They had been hiding in the cramped space for 2 years, and the boy hiding with her had become close and shared everything with each other. But their relationship was eventually discovered by her father. Her father warned Anne that she could be friends with the boy, but she absolutely could not cross the line. But Anne, stubborn and in her teenage years, believed she was already independent and did not need to obey anyone. To avoid arguing with her father, she wrote him a letter saying she was grown and independent, and she even mentioned she was about to do the very things he had forbidden. Her father was furious when he read it. He scolded Anne for being cared for with all their love yet still hurting them so deeply. He believed his strictness would make Anne understand her parents' intentions, but he never expected that later that night, The stubborn Anne would secretly go to the boy's room and lie down on his bed. She asked him with anticipation if he wanted to understand each other more deeply, and she even pulled his hand onto herself. But the startled boy slowly pulled his hand back, because Anne's father had warned him he could be her friend but must not cross any boundaries. Seeing him remain still beside her, Anne gave a faint smile. Anne had been hiding with her family and the others in the storage room for more than 2 years. She had stared countless times at the window covered by curtains. Again and again she imagined green fields, warm sunlight, a swing in the woods, and the gentle breeze on her face. As news arrived of the Allied landing in Normandy and the German forces retreating, smiles began appearing on everyone's faces. They knew their days of hiding in the cramped room were finally nearing an end. Anne, filled with joy, longed even more for the free world and fresh air outside. She even discussed her future life with her boyfriend, making plans for when they could finally leave the room. She continued revising her diary, preparing it for publication after the war. But when things seemed certain, the unexpected happens. A German officer suddenly arrived at the store with several soldiers. The store owner had been sheltering Anne's family and 4 other Jewish people for 2 years. Hearing the German soldiers, the owner felt waves of panic rising inside him. Forced by threats, he led them to the second-floor storage area. In front of them, he reluctantly opened the cabinet that covered the entrance to the hidden room. The trained soldiers quickly moved through the passage and rushed into the room. The 8 refugees, still lost in the belief that the war was nearly over, were all arrested. Anne, who had been filled with hope, cried in despair. The German soldiers began searching the room. Anne's beloved diary was thrown onto the floor. She turned back to look at it one last time, then left the place where she had hidden for more than 2 years. She had imagined countless times what it would feel like to step out of the dark room, but she never imagined she would walk out under guard. She lifted her head toward the sun, and the warm light on her face was the feeling she had dreamt of for so long. But it came too suddenly, and with no comfort at all, and followed the group onto the truck prepared for them. They soon arrived at a camp. They were again given clothes marked with the 6-pointed star. Her arm was stamped with a number representing her identity. Then her long hair was completely shaved off. After that, Anne and her sister were transferred to another camp. A few months later, Anne passed away at the age of 15. Of the 8 people who hid together in that cramped space, only Anne's father survived until the end of the war.